Welcome to the MSDW Podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at msdynamicsworld.com. On this episode, we are talking CRM project outcomes with Chuck Ingram. Chuck last joined the podcast about 3 years ago. He updates us on his professional path since then, including his new firm, CongruentX. As he explains, he is aiming for a different approach to CRM project success with the new firm. He's still focused on Microsoft's CRM-related technology, and we talk about the impact of products like Power Apps and Dynamics 365 Customer Insights. We also discuss how customers are adapting and some of the upcoming events that Chuck is going to be participating in. Hey, Chuck, welcome to the podcast. Welcome back to the podcast. It's been a while since we've had you here.
I know. I missed it. I'm glad to be back.
I think I was just looking. It's almost exactly 3 years, and time really does fly. You've moved through a couple of stages of stuff in your career ever since then. Maybe we could reintroduce you to the podcast listeners. Can you tell everyone a little bit about who you are and what you've been up to since we last talked?
Yeah, I'll give you a little bit of my background if it helps. So I was in a totally different industry back in the late 90s, and we implemented this thing called CRM. It was when they first were starting to do it, and I was in the textile business with an amazing company called Milliken and Company, and I loved working there, but I just felt like, man, I don't know if this is the place to be for 30, 40 more years of working. So I kept thinking about what I wanted to do, and we implemented the CRM thing, and I was a small part of the team that implemented it, and they picked me to go talk about it in front of a bunch of people, and it really went well, and I liked it, and Mr. Milliken wrote me a letter, and it was really neat. And so I remember one night I was in a hotel in Nashville, and on one of those Courtyard Marriott cards, I wrote down that I'm big on goals and stuff like that. I had just bought Microsoft stock, and I thought that was a really cool company, and I wanted to do CRM at Microsoft. And funny enough, I took some classes to make myself better in some of the technical things, and like 3 years later I was at Microsoft, and I worked there, and they launched their CRM product while I was there, which is interesting luck and fate. And I got to be a part of a bunch of the early projects in version 1.0 that we don't speak of that much anymore, but they stuck with it. That is the cool thing, and they really invested in it, and it got to be a much better solution over the years. And I was there for like 8 years, I think, or something like that, and went out into the partner channel. I worked at a couple mid-sized partners and a couple really big partners. Most recently, I think last time we spoke, I was at TriBridge, which was an amazing organization, fantastic culture, very entrepreneurial spirit. And then after that, I went over to Avanade. TriBridge was acquired, and I decided that I should move on to the next thing. And I've been running the CRM business for the last couple years over at Avanade for North America. And I decided to strike out on my own. And really the reason that I did that was, people are buying CRM like crazy. I kind of lucked into this. I wrote that thing down on that card, the Courtyard Marriott thing, 20 years ago almost. And it's just growing like crazy. It's become like a $50 billion industry. And it's what I do. I know how to do this, and I know how to play a little bit of guitar. And and it's funny that the difficult thing about it, though, is people are buying it like crazy because they want to get closer to their customers. But what we're finding, and I started to see this about 3-4 years ago, maybe a little bit further back, is they're buying this software like crazy. It's growing like crazy, but they're only happy with it about half the time. And it's just been bugging me more and more over the years. This is what I do. If I'm a physician, I don't want the guy limping out 50% of the time when I do a surgery. I'm a bus driver. I don't want the people kind of scared the whole time when I'm driving and I drop them off down the street from where they're supposed to be. I want it to be, 100%. I want people to be happy and the thing that I do to be fantastic. And I just kind of, got together with a group of people and we decided that 50% was not okay and what should we do about it. And we started working in TriBridge on this different model that was a subscription model, and it was working great. Jason, it was like those clients that were on that subscription model, they were happy and they wanted to go to lunch and they would be a reference and things like that. And it was encouraging and I wanted to keep doing it. But sometimes when there's an acquisition, the company has a different strategy. They want to go be more enterprise focused or more SI type focused. And so I got to a point in my career, loved working with Avanade, fantastic, super smart people, that I just wanted to go out and build a company around clients. And I said, well, okay, if I built a company with some people I really liked around client success, what would that look like? And we sort of said, okay, well, one thing, it can't just be about projects. It should be about clients. So projects are great. You got to do them, but let's figure out how that it can be about clients. And for the folks that work there, we never want to ever use the word resource again. I've been called a resource. Everybody in consulting I know has been called a resource, and we're not going to use that word. It's people. Your team members. Why can't we just call it that, and not be as focused about chargeability, but be focused about helping the client get stuff done. And the last piece of it is not so much about, and it speaks to the other thing I talked about is hours, and not be focused as much about hours and chargeability as outcomes. Did we get, because if we could build a model that's about clients, not projects, people, not resources, and outcomes, not hours, I think there will be a way we can make money off that, and then everybody's happy. So that's what we sort of kind of put our heads together to do. And the interesting thing, Jason, is it's not that hard. It's just you have to think of it differently. It suggests a different kind of a model. And if you look back, like when I was first going into this whole CRM thing, and a lot of us were looking at it at the beginning, if we went back in a time machine, and I just got this iPhone over Christmas, and if I brought that iPhone back in time into 2001 and threw it on the desk in the middle of a conference room full of consultants, they went, oh, wow, this is so cool. I can look up, anything. It talks to me. It tells me I'm going for a run. I can look up anything in the world. But then you take the iPhone out of the room and you go start to work with the client. Right now, it looks really exactly the same as it did 20 years ago. And it feels like we need to evolve that model. Technology has changed, the way people work has changed, customer expectations have changed, and maybe the way we help our clients with their software should change a little. And so we decide that we'll always have to do projects, but we're trying not to call it a project so much as like an onboarding, because it's going to be a journey. We're going to go on a journey together with the client to help them get stuff, to get business results, get outcomes. So we put together this new company, and it's called CongruentX, and it's about helping customers align their people with technology versus just focusing on the technology. And it's mostly a subscription model. We got to do projects. We do projects, but we want to help people get what the outcomes that they wanted out of the software. So I probably could take a breath and see if you have something, anything you wanted to ask, but that's kind of what my journey's been over the last few years.
Yeah, right. No, it raises so many things that I'm curious about to go a little deeper. And like,
Sure.
I mean, one of the things I think of, Avanade or even Tribridge, which really saw
Hmm.
a ton of growth over its lifetime before it was acquired, was
Yeah.
the scale of the type of projects CRM projects that you must see on a regular basis or have been seeing over the last several years. They're, I imagine, fairly large scale enterprise or upper mid market companies, big kind of projects that take a lot of oversight and management and a lot of money on the line. And it's, so for me, it's always been very easy to understand, how those
Hmm.
end up being very, waterfall or very resource managed in terms of resources and headcount and billable
Hmm.
hours, and how people sort of fall into that over and over. Um, when you were planning this new venture, did you see it as something that could take companies from end to end, from deployment of a new solution to going live with it, from I don't know, from purchasing it to going live with it, or do you see it as something that sits alongside maybe an existing system that didn't maybe launch so successfully, or alongside a company that's trying to plan with a big a big global SI, to for the horsepower to get it deployed? I mean, or is it all of the above?
Yeah, well, I think there's two particular things that you talked about that we can unpack a little, which are really cool because one of the things that we are in our early, we're a new company, but our early conversations with clients are we're finding that, I always wonder where this quote came from, and then but there's a quote that I read some that said, "You have everything you need." And sometimes the client does have everything they need. They're just, maybe they're not using it the right way, or they went about implementing it, that big, big bang project was the wrong thing. So I think we can, a lot of times, and people can work with us. We're open for business, or they can, maybe some of the work that we've done thinking this through can inform how a client can go try to do some of this stuff themselves. But I do think there's validity in it. And so a lot of times you do have what you need. We can help a client get outcomes out of their CRM without starting over. So that's one thing. And there's a lot of it out there. There are tons and tons of clients that have gone and implemented CRM, and you call them back 3 years later and they were happy when you left. The project was green, but you call them back 3 years later and things aren't going that great. And they're not mad because you left, and the project's over, you fulfilled your contract, but things aren't going that great. So we kind of dissected that journey. And I think what it does is it informs this business model that you and I are talking about, kind of this journey based model where we're focused on, okay, there's an outcome. Like, think about a plane that's flying through the air, and I'm not a pilot, but I know a few of them, and they tell me that a plane is off course like 99% of the time, but it's constantly making course corrections. So if we're flying to LA right now, the plane's going to be off course, but that autopilot is going to be constantly making course corrections. And I think the challenge that we see in our industry is we kind of do this project and then we just take our hands off the controls and we go on to the next thing, and we go back up the bus with a lot of consultants and help the next client. And the client has maybe not allocated enough resources or thought through how to keep things on track. So what we want to do is help folks, one, stay aligned and stay on course with course corrections constantly through their journey, aligned toward those outcomes. And the cool thing that does is, one, is it helps you forecast your business better, or have happier customers, or whatever the thing they bought it for is. The other one is, once people get stuff in their hands, it changes. The team that did this big requirements analysis and all that stuff for the project, they maybe were didn't have all the requirements, or what their big requirements list was once the people get their hands on it, it doesn't work the way they wanted it to work, and you have to change things around a little bit. So that's important. And the other thing we've thought through is sometimes it doesn't necessarily have to be a big project, right? And you can still have big goals, but you have to do them all at once. Sometimes you see this collision between what the purchasing wants and the business wants and what the timeline drives. So there's this, if you kind of look at on a axis, there's features vertical, and people want as many features as they can afford, but on the horizontal, they want to deliver them as fast as they possibly can. And what happens is you have this big list of features, and the people just can't consume those features, and then they start struggling after the team that implemented leaves. And sometimes it just keeps going until it fails, and then they go try to buy another software, and then they have the same problem because they find out it wasn't necessarily the software, it was the way, it was the approach. And sometimes they just have this huge thing consultants call the valley of despair. Right. And the interesting thing is, if we think that when we want to talk to clients about our onboarding, it's a project, but it's an onboarding. We want to talk to clients about maybe taking that some of those features, and instead of trying to do it all at once, to spread them out across the journey. Because when you try to do too much, that kind of becomes unconsumable value, where you bought all this stuff and you never got to use it all. But if you plan to do it across a longer journey, people do get to use it and they can consume it. It's just not too much for them. So it changes, to your point, it changes the way that you do that initial project. And the second part is we kind of, we think we can be extremely successful and help people by almost like living in that valley of despair. We can help them get out of that.
I imagine that that approach is even more valid today if you're looking at the Microsoft business applications landscape, where they're pushing updates every 6 months. And throughout that time, month by month as well, to some extent, as those features become ready and get launched. And even if you're a company that did a great job putting all the features in place before, you're now facing a landscape that it's going to continue to change. And I can't imagine, even if you had like an above average, successful sort of traditional project originally, you're now facing new features that you have to evaluate, consume, and probably you're going to want to roll out some of them as well, and you're going to have a new approach to manage that from now kind of till however long this approach at Microsoft happens. I don't know. Has that entered into any of your conversations?
It definitely has, and it's interesting, and a lot of this can revolve around this new, it's not exactly new to you and I, but the Power Platform has gotten really, really popular recently. And we're just kind of taking a little bit different view of it. And we 100% agree with Microsoft that it's a kind of democratization of code. Like, everybody can be a coder, and that's great. We think that it can help be a democratization tool for data. So as the technology changes, as things change, if your system is one that has these giant forms with 150 fields on them, it's really hard to change that. But if the way your users consume their work are a bunch of contextual apps, you can be a lot more nimble. So the way we're kind of thinking of things is, in a lot of cases, the customer's experience when they're at home, they see, it's Google. I talk to it. And when it's my phone, I have a whole bunch of apps on my phone, and the one that I buy tickets to the movies on is a different one than the one that I do my email on, and it's contextual. And we think that the way that people work is going to be a lot more like that over the future, Because when you think about that experience you have at home and you go to work and a client calls, and the client, we all know, has more information now than they used to have. They're extremely educated. They have the internet. And when they call, they ask for stuff, but then the experience you get at work looks like 1999. It's these big forms, and I think we've heard James Phillips talk about this a lot. Is these big forms, and you can't you can't serve somebody from that. So it to your point, it makes it very difficult to be flexible technically, and it also makes it hard on the users. So we think that this Power Platform gives you technical agility, and it gives you agility in front of your clients, the ability to serve your clients better. We just have to get people to feel more comfortable with using it. And the other thing is as I mentioned, it's really can be a democratization of data versus everybody getting wrapped up around the fact that, I'm worried that everybody's going to be a coder. I think we can look at it a couple ways there, right?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about the opportunity for Power Platform with your clients, do you see it something I've been trying to figure out a bit, is replacing legacy applications versus just looking at opportunities to build new things that either use existing data sources or automate interaction between existing systems, and maybe just building sort of marginally on top of it, rather than wholesale replacement or migration of systems. I don't know. Do you see things going one way or another with companies you're talking to?
Well, at least so far, it seems like there's the best opportunity is for another layer. Because the data is there. It's just making, in a lot of cases, it's just making sense of it for somebody at the right time to help a client, or for a client to absorb something in a portal or something like that. So I think what we're seeing is there's almost maybe this new layer that sits above the line of business apps and the traditional enterprise apps that can help companies get value out of it. So, I mean, think about, like, marketers have really thought some of this stuff through. And I love one of my favorite business people was Roger Milliken. He said, steal shamelessly and give credit. And so I think the marketers have thought this through, right? So if Jason and Chuck Incorporated are running ads on Facebook, do we send them to Jason and Chuck Incorporated website, or do we send them to a landing page that has? So if we have all these different business things we do, we probably just confuse people if we send them to the website. But if we send them to this purpose-built landing page, then all of a sudden our conversion rate goes up infinitely. So I think if you take some of what we learn from marketers and take it internally, it kind of informs this new model where people, sometimes they'll be in CRM, but sometimes they'll be in a Power App, or sometimes they'll be in an app inside of CRM, or sometimes they can be in an ISV app that's built on the Power Platform. I've seen some really cool ones lately. So I think we might see a bit of a layer that sits on top of those enterprise apps, and that might be okay. That's kind of the way we do our work. That's kind of the way we live our lives outside of work. So maybe that can be the way we work.
Interesting. Yeah, I can certainly see things moving that direction too. I think I maybe started thinking about it more on the ERP side, because an ERP, upgrade and migration is such a heavy lift. Where CRM maybe it's still big, but maybe slightly more possible in a lot of cases. But nevertheless, I think this idea of sort of adding, like you said, I like the landing page or the sort of the marketing strategy analogy that does kind of make sense in terms of how these things can be adopted. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was going to say, I was talking to a friend, Jessica Noble, yesterday, and she made a point. She's a CX expert, and she made the point that when we were talking that CX is not, like, a lot of people equate customer experience with CRM and kind of landing pages and things like that, and portals, and the ERP can be a part of CX. So this whole layer thing that we're talking about can apply to ERP and CRM. So, the way you get an invoice is still part of customer experience. The way somebody enters a case is still part of customer experience. So I think we can look at both of them,
Sure.
ERP and CRM, as a part of this new kind of customer facing and employee facing layer of apps.
It's funny. I was just I was looking at a demo yesterday of a sort of a better way for ERP for a company to sort of help their customers, do payments
Mm.
that connect right to the ERP, and customer experience really wasn't at the top of the list of reasons why. I mean, it was a cool
Mm.
product and everything, but the fact that it all of a sudden makes your customers' lives so much better wasn't really the selling point at the top of their list, and I just thought that was so interesting because you know. Thinking of it maybe as a person who's doing those payments more than that's the real. I mean, that's you're making your I think customers happier, and it's just funny how if you're coming at it from an ERP perspective, it might not always seem that way.
Yeah, yeah. It's I think I mentioned this stat earlier in our chat, but and I didn't make it up, but I think it's a Gartner one, but it's like I think it's 89%, but it's I say 9 out of 10 companies think customer experience is going to be their top, sort of secret sauce this year in 2020. So it's interesting how that can, like you're saying, it can be something that's in their CRM, informing their sales reps to help their clients better, informing their customer service reps to help their clients better, or even informing their operational people on how they can help clients to look up a bill or things like that.
Yeah.
It's an exciting time.
Another thing that I've seen recently from Microsoft, I don't know how relevant it is to you, is the they seem to be building up sort of guidance on centers of excellence around Power Platform. Um,
Hmm.
and from what you're talking about with what CongruentX is doing and kind of long term, engagement with companies and their plans over time. Does that enter into your work at all? Centers of excellence, sort of housed within a client company.
Yeah, it absolutely does, and I actually learned a lot about that from my time at working at Avanade, because we had some of the first really big clients that decided to kind of roll the chips with the Power Platform. And it's like, on one hand, those clients were excited about, oh wow, this guy that used to have to do this process with a spreadsheet or even with a piece of paper, now this person can use a Power App, can inform them and help them make better decisions. They could get off the job site faster and have the customers happier, or whatever the case may be. But on the other hand, they didn't want to revisit the kind of the Lotus Notes, sort of some of the things that happen with SharePoint, where things just, if someone tells you to go to, oh, it's on a SharePoint site, it's like you just give up. It's
Right.
like it's like there are thousands of them. I can't make sense of it. So the whole COE thing absolutely fits in our model, because one of the things that we believe is, in talking to some of the folks inside of our firm and to our clients, is, sometimes the client doesn't have enough stuff for you to do to be full time, and not having full time billable work for a consultant for one client is sometimes a challenging thing for a consulting firm. But we actually think it's an opportunity, because you can work with multiple clients, you don't get burned out, you're helping multiple people get outcomes. So being a fractional help to a client implies a couple things. One is, like I said, great work environment, a lot of fun. You live your company's culture, versus just, if you're embedded in the client, you live their culture, and that might be good and that might not be perfect. The other side of it, we want to work with the client
Right.
on the center of excellence. So if the client, you wouldn't go build all the Power Apps for the client in most cases. you want the client to be able to sustain it. And that's that whole journey-based approach, where we could help the client establish the center of excellence. We could be a part of the team helping them to do stuff, but we're also teaching them how to do things so they can do things on their own.
Yeah, I imagine it's. I think I don't know. I mean, I think Microsoft saw some early Power Platform customers doing that. The one I saw that I was really impressed by was, I think, Schlumberger,
Mm-hmm.
who I saw speak at last year, and they sort of did a very top down sort of IT driven center of excellence approach for
Mm-hmm.
Power Apps, and it was very impressive, and not something that smaller companies could all do at quite that level of intensity, but probably something that I'm
Mm-hmm.
guessing Microsoft and bigger SIs probably saw and said, okay, that's a good benchmark for how well our company can ensure that, like you said, Power Apps don't proliferate the way SharePoint sites have, or Lotus Notes applications, or whatever they were called. Sort of, I worked at a company that had a Lotus Notes thing going on, and it was just every day there was like a new one launching for for any sort of almost trivial need,
Mm-hmm.
until they were like unmanageable. But
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, one quick point on
yeah.
that is I think the cool thing is you can take the center of excellence concept to an enterprise company, and to your point, it can be kind of top down thing, and a lot of times it'll drive like a factory model where they have lots of requests, and they can you can build these sprint teams and so forth to the build the Power Apps, because they'll have a huge initiative. Right? But I think you could take that same approach and sort of a lighter approach to it. You can build for a smaller company a way that things don't get out of control, but a way they can get stuff done,
Mm-hmm.
so they can still, to use that flowery term, democratize their data and get it out to their users, and be nimble, be flexible as this new technology is. I suspect if you're like a training company for Power Apps, that one of the big challenges is it changes every week in a good way. There's new stuff every every 2 weeks, and by having those kind of the guardrails established inside of a firm, it gives you the room to be entrepreneurial, but at the same time not to let things go too crazy where things get out of hand.
Right. How do you see, maybe shifting gears a little bit here?
Mm-hmm.
Something I'm always trying to sort of pay attention to is how Microsoft's doing, sort of keeping its partners, happy or engaged. Any insight coming from one of Microsoft's biggest partners, Avanade, and even TriBridge before that, to where
Mm-hmm.
you're at now. How do you think Microsoft's doing in fostering partners to make these customers successful on the D365 and Power Platform?
What everything I can give you what I've seen high level and what I've seen sort of personally. High level, it seems like there are so many more resources than when I think of the time when I left Microsoft at first, and I still knew everybody, so I had all those inroads into the firm to get help, but there just wasn't that much help for partners. But when you look at it now, I think they're like tripling their sales force and all these kind of things. So there's so many more resources for partners than there used to be. And kind of from a personal perspective, we kind of intentionally decided to focus on the mid market. So we saw an opportunity where lots and lots of companies have bought CRM, and if the stats hold up, about half the time they're not going to be too happy with it. But at the same time, their partner was probably acquired and now is being asked to be focused on the enterprise. So we went towards the towards the mid-market type clients. And interestingly enough, like our interactions with Microsoft so far have been, oh, thank you, this is great. We need more partners focused on the mid-market. So it's been really cool. And I think it seems like when they tied when they put two and two together that CRM would drive Azure consumption, all of a sudden the resources flowed into helping partners be successful in driving CRM consumption, which in my world is adoption, which would drive Azure consumption. So everybody's happy there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And oh yeah, and the way you frame that makes a lot of sense. I mean, so many companies that don't necessarily need to buy a new CRM package. They just need, and they don't maybe necessarily need to. I think what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, that they don't necessarily need to face down a whole new implementation project. They could, over time, make steady investments to sort of right the ship, make those corrections, and get more either out of new technology or perhaps what they already have to a large extent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you could with the it's it's sometimes you have to we have to take ourselves out of our what we know and forget what we know, and we know tables and databases, and it's interesting, clients don't always fit in a neat little table, and the way that they behave is sometimes not easily fit into that table. So if you build this rigid monolithic thing, so, and then think you can just change it all the time, that's hard. But if you build this little layer that sits on top of it, you can change that layer, can become malleable and kind of flex to what you need to know. And then they they came out with a CDP. One day they had a customer, they didn't have a CDP, and they have a CDP. They have all these insights solutions that are not table, not object driven, like like a traditional CRM database. So if you think that a client's behavior is can't be tracked in database tables as easily, as you've got this extra layer that you can bring to bear to help try to figure out what your clients really want, that we used to not be able to we didn't have in the past.
Yeah. Um, yeah, that certainly seems to be a priority from Microsoft at least, and you're seeing some interest in what that can offer to organizations.
Yeah, for sure. Because what they were pretty smart, in my opinion, with what that Microsoft's done with the insight stuff. And there have been a lot of customer data platforms out there
Sure.
in the last 3 or 4 years that have gotten a lot of traction, but they can be pretty expensive and be kind of long and drawn out, and implementations. And Microsoft's put out something where you can get results, and maybe you take those results from the first initiative and you can fund the next thing and the next thing after that with this with the customer insights,
Mm-hmm.
and really all the insights, but the customer insights is the really exciting one to me, because it's a CDP. It's really cool.
Yeah, I think I wrote a couple weeks ago when Microsoft's earnings came out. That was Satya Nadella mentioned that particular product of all the D365 offerings, which
Hmm.
is such a large list now. That was the one that he mentioned in his earnings. I forget if it was in the analyst call or if it was in the statement, but that was like one of the few sort of biz apps specific applications that got mentioned. So
Ah,
that's significant, or
it
maybe an
has a
indication at
future.
least. Yeah.
It has a bright future. I think it could be one of those things that, Microsoft has, as this market's grown, Microsoft's grown too, but I'm not so sure Microsoft has, on the CRM front, has extended their market share as much as they'd like it to,
No, I don't think so.
versus, Salesforce and those guys. But I'm not so sure that, like, the Power Platform and the customer insights and things like that, it might it's changing things a little bit, and maybe you don't define everything as CRM or not CRM as the way you used to. So maybe Salesforce's market share will still be high, but Microsoft's market share will grow.
Um, yeah, I mean, well, I agree on that. I wanted to. just touch on one other thing here before I forget. I had and I just remembered about this. I saw that you are going to be at an event I'm going to be at in a few weeks, which is the 365 Power Up one-day
Oh,
event
yeah.
in Tampa, right?
Yeah, I can't wait for that.
Yeah, I think you're the keynote speaker.
Yeah, I won't give away the farm on this, but I thought a lot about what I wanted to talk about there, and there are, how many speakers are there? Like 20?
Yeah, 2025, something like that.
So there's probably 19 that are more technical than me. uh, but what I wanted to get people excited about is how they could, because you work 90,000 hours in your life, and the average person does, and there's some crazy stats around how many people are not happy at work. And then there's even this other group of people that is significant. It's like a quarter of people who are actively disengaged in their job, which means they hate us. They're working against you in your company. And so many people are not gratified from what they do. And I really see the Power Platform in all seriousness, a way that people can change their career trajectory and make their work more gratifying. They can solve problems inside of their companies and be entrepreneurial. Like, I decided not too long ago to be an entrepreneur, but being an entrepreneur is fun too. And people who are entrepreneurial are they're a lot of times the happiest people inside of a company. And that's what I'm going to talk about and I have this little example that we're going to talk about, how democratization of code is great, and democratization of data is going to open up opportunities for people to change their career, change their whole trajectory, and make their work gratifying and fun, and increase their value in the company they work at. So I'll try not to be too Tony Robbins with it, but I hope it'll be a little, it tee up some of the other good topics that are out there.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I look forward to it. I'll make sure to say hello when I'm there. And I think they have a pretty nice event. I'm not sure. I think it might be their first one, one of the very first ones for that 365 Power Up group.
Yeah, my friend Beth Burrell is leading it, and she is just fantastic. She has just driven that thing like crazy. I think they have a 125 or 150 or something number of people already signed up, so it's already a full house.
Yeah, and a nice mix, I think, of local experts and people coming in to the area to present or to even just attend. I think they have some. Well, I'm coming in from the Northeast, and I think she said there's some people coming in from maybe Canada or just a range of places.
Yeah. I think Rick McCutcheon was maybe coming in from Canada, and I think Ben Vollmer will be there. It's going to be really fun.
Yeah, agreed. All right, well, I look forward to that. Well, so congratulations on the new company, CongruentX.
Thank
we'll
you.
Obviously link up to it. I'm excited to see what where it goes, what kind of successes you rack up, and so please keep in touch, and feel free to share some of the stories with us as you go.
That sounds great, Jason, and I look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks.
Yeah, in nice warm Tampa.
That'll be awesome.
All right, thanks again, Chuck.
Thanks so much, Jason.
This has been another episode of the MSDW Podcast. My thanks once again to Chuck Ingram of CongruentX for joining me today. If you have any questions or comments, please do reach out, jgumpert at msdynamicsworld.com. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World signing off.